Hopefully we don't have 4 minutes of blank on the CD. Last week, I talked about the context of the teaching where God was addressing two groups of people and told a couple parables to show the two groups of people, and then gave an allegorical picture of what he was talking about in those two parables. And because of the way it is taught in the world, it's a unique thing that even in some translation of the Bible, it calls it the parable of the, what's it called? Thank you. The parable of the prodigal. It says it in your Bible. This is the parable of the prodigal son. And as I said, there's no such thing. It's not a parable. It's not a parable. But in interpreting the parables he did give about the lost sheep, the lost coin, those are the two parables. He told about a man who had two sons. And because of the way it's taught in the biblical Christianity of the world, all the focus is on the younger son, and it is taught that you should identify with the younger son because that's who we were, all the younger son, and then we're restored back to God. When I read it, I always identify with the older son. And so I'm going to talk about the two sons. This message is about the two sons of that particular allegory, and it's based in the transition from parables to the allegorical description of what he is talking about in Luke 15:11. Then, after telling the two parables, he said, a certain man had two sons. So, Yeshua never did anything sloppily. He never said something to say it. There's always levels of deep thoughts behind anything that he said. Indeed, the whole Bible is that way. But it's about a man who had two sons, and almost everybody agrees that the man is God somehow. Could be Yeshua, but it is certainly probably God. But he had two sons. It doesn't say he had a son that was a schlep. It said he had two sons. And in the interpretation of the parables that had been given, he chose to start with the younger brother, which is unique because that's not the way it's done historically. And it begins with the younger son who is rebellious, who leaves, who is unhappy with the status quo, and he breaks all the cultural rules that existed at that point in our history, and he demands his inheritance, which showed he had no respect for his dad. Because you get your portion, there are three portions, a double portion to the older, a single portion to the younger. You don't get your portion until your dad dies. Okay? And what he was saying was, look, I'm not. You're not worth. I'm not going to wait till you die. Give me what I'm going to get. Which means you are dead to me. You are dead to me. I'm taking my inheritance and leaving. But in the cultural context of that kind of a familiar situation, it's like, you know what? You're dead to me. Just give me my inheritance. You're dead to me. You're dead to me. And then he leaves because he doesn't be around with his brother, because his brother gets two portions, 2/3, a double portion, as they say. And that is a story, really, of a lot of people who, deep down inside, I think most of the world knows there is a God. There are varying awarenesses of who God is, but almost all cultures have a concept of God. And with the exception of those cultures who do have a God that is demonic and is based, there's a lot of turmoil that comes from a knowledge of God. Indeed, most wars have been fought by people following various gods. It causes a lot of problems. But the problem that we have here in the West, to a large extent, and I would include South America, Canada, here in the West, which is a little bit different than the rest of the world because of the type of Christianities that exist in the world. In the West, everyone thinks all Christians are like the Christians in this country, except there's 45,000 denominations, so you can't really say a Christian and know what that means. You might define it, but I'll find you a Christian who say, we don't define it that way. And so it gets confusing. But it is not unheard of that somebody gets rebellious and wants to be out on his own, because to that person, his father's dead. To that person, God is dead, I can go do whatever I want. And when you say, I can do whatever I want, you're saying God is dead. God is dead. Now that person is somebody who leaves in a lot of my thought process in the simpler way of finding things is Mishle, is Proverbs. Proverbs 18:1 says, one who isolates oneself seeks his own desire. He defies all sound judgment. People who say there is no God, I'll go do what I want because I'm going to seek my own desire, they defy all sound judgment. One of the things that I'm watching in the world today, because in PAX, when you Goth and I both have little contacts all over the world with thinking. We're dealing with people from all over the world, and my Israel tour, which I'm working on diligently right now, and I've set the itinerary. And we're still sorting out, and it's difficult because of Christian eschatology. And it just blew up everything that I was going to do. And what I see happening in the world as a whole is there is I didn't mean to teach on this. There is a shaking of the very foundations of the world, where there is no longer truth is not truth. What I feel is what is true. And it's not only being thought about, it's being shoved down our throat by a government who, when there was a pandemic of a flu, said your job is not significant. Therefore, you can stay home. Told landlords, your tenants don't have to pay rent. And it was worldwide, and it's like, wait a minute. My job is significant no matter what anyone else thinks. You know, the education of my children is significant to me. Landlords think it's legitimate. If you're living in my house, you could pay my rent. And now our grocery stores look like third world countries where you can't get anything. And it's a destabilization of the entire world in every country where what's right no longer counts. People are defying sound judgment. Our new Supreme Court Justice, can you say what a woman is? No. That didn't used to be a hard question. It's stupid that you have to ask such a question. It's more stupid that you can't answer that question. What is going on? There is no longer any sense to it. Why? God is dead. I'm going to do what I want. And here's the reality. I'm a boy, but I feel like a girl. Therefore, I am a girl. And I'm going to go to the girls' locker room. You notice there's not a lot of girls fighting in the boys' locker room? And it's getting messier, and you probably don't pay attention. Big national gathering in the UK for a race. I think it was a race or swimming. Does anybody know what happened in the UK? And there was a guy who said he was a girl who wanted to compete. And they said, yes, you can compete because you say you're a girl, therefore you are a girl. And all the girls said, he can compete. It's all his. And every girl stepped back and said, he wants to compete? Fine, we won't. We won't. I said, I hope that catches on. Because it's that reality. And now, in Sweden, a pastor just won a trial. He was charged with terrorism because he said a marriage is between a man and a woman, which is terrorism. And he actually won. But you know what? I'm sorry. In the beginning, he created male and female. He created them. And if you feel that something else, that feeling is a reality, but it's not the truth. It's not the truth. But one who isolates himself from God defies all sound judgment. Proverbs 21:16. Do you have 21:16? That's where I think. 21:16. Do you have that one? I'll read it. I'm going 20. That's like the next one. 21:16. Whoever strays from the path of wisdom ends up in the congregation of the dead. Whoever strays from the path of wisdom ends up in the congregation of the dead. I got another message coming up sometime. It's running around in my head. But there's, you know what, if you want to, if your God is dead, if wisdom, which is what is, it's not that difficult. We have historically made all kind of mistakes with the fact that we are different from one another, but it was based on reality of we are different than one another, rather than on there is no reality, it is what I feel. Truth is not important, how I feel is important. And you stray away from the path of wisdom, you end up in the congregation of the dead. There's a lot of people out there. Now, 24:16 that she has. Whoever, okay, let me go back. 26:12. Do you see one in his own eyes? There's more hope for a fool than him. I know what I feel. I am what I feel. This is what I am, even though it's not. But the world is made that way. It's beginning ugly. Are you paying attention to the shove back of other states against Florida's newer laws that we have made? Do you know they're passing laws in some states? You must teach sex education with all the peripheries of what to first and second graders. They're making a law in a couple states, and they're saying you should be looking at pornography. Everybody does. It's free. And they're teaching at the first and second graders in some states. As a pushback against us, which says don't do anything to anyone until fourth grade. You know what? People are wise in their own eyes. An idiot is better than that. Because they think this is wisdom. But we are all-inclusive. By becoming all-inclusive, we are becoming exclusive in everything. We can be offended by one another. Any of us that are Jewish, the world saw us as different and slaughtered more than a third of us. Any of us who are black from Africa, the Western white world brutalized people. But according to the Bible, it's okay, you're allowed to have slaves. It's like, wait a minute. You go over into Europe, it's Catholics against Christians sometimes. And always going to boil down to the same reality. God is dead, I can do what I want. Psalms, just go where I'm going next, because I look. Psalm 10:4. The wicked one with his nose in the air never seeks him. All his thoughts are, there is no God. In other people, I am the greatest person that ever lived. I know all things. There is no God. Therefore, I am my own God, and my reality is the truth. Regardless of how ridiculous it is, there's no more wisdom. And I'm joining the congregation of the dead because we're all in agreement that reality, that truth, is all predicated on how I feel. Don't confuse me with science. Yeshua was addressing this problem in Luke chapter 8, verse 13. This is the sowing of seeds, which is the story of the kingdom. Okay? It's sowing the seeds. I just chose one of those. Those in the rocky places are ones who, when they hear, accept with joy. But these have no root. They believe for a season. In a time of testing, they fall away. See, in a time of testing, yes, I'll believe. That makes sense. I feel good about believing. Then things get a little bit difficult. You fall away. You fall away. Verse 14. Now that which fell to the thorns are those who are hearing, but they go along the way. They're choked with the cares and riches and pleasures of life, and they do not bear mature fruit. And other people accept, they ascend to a understanding and a belief and acceptance of the reality of Messiah, of the reality of God. They will ascend to that mentally, but they're choked by the cares and riches and pleasures of the world. And the world today is taking over the younger generations, 2 generations, 3 generations below me, trying to grab them so the future will be made up of adults who were raised up all over the world. There is no central truth. There is no central reality. We are all our own gods, and how we feel is what is true. And the only time we're going to have a problem when that happens is my feeling is going to be different than your feeling. And we both have the different feelings and the conflicting feelings. But since there is no truth, you can't prove what you feel. And it's happening all over the place already with us. And Yeshua dealt with that reality when he was walking among us, because we were rebellious people who had religion, but we didn't have God. We were doing things our own way. We had the instructions of God, which we interpreted according to our understanding, our feeling. And in Luke 12, verse 16, he told a parable. A parable is a story telling a deep truth. A certain rich man produced good crops. It's a parable. By what? A rich man whose business was doing well. Verse 17. And he began thinking to himself, what shall I do? I don't have a place to store my harvest. I'm blessed so much I can't hold on to all of it. And then he sums up his reality in verse 18. Here's what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build larger ones. Then I'll store all my grain in my goods. And next verse. And I will say to myself, O my soul, you have plenty of goods saved up for many years. Take it easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. No more concerns, nothing to worry about. I am blessed. I'm going to eat, drink, and be merry. And next verse, God said to him, you fool, you idiot. Tonight your soul will be demanded back from you, and what you have repaired, whose will that be? You're holding on to the truth and reality of the world, which is ridiculous. And you think, I have stability. In the West, we think money is the source of stability. Money is the source of a good life. In a lot of the world, water is the key. What is your priority? I was telling somebody, one of the rabbis I ordained over in Zambia, Thomas Kapoki, lives way up north towards the west, and dirt houses, nothing. He found out that if he climbs up to the top of one of the mountains, he can get a signal on his laptop, and he watches our services. And he's thoroughly enjoying our services. And I said, yeah, too bad, because when it rains, my people don't come. I mean, you do, but I'm talking about the other people. This guy climbs the mountain, turns on his computer, and watches us. Blessings, Thomas. We appreciate you. You know, what's important to him? They scrape the dirt with a stick, put seeds on it, and then pray that God will take care of it, and it'll grow, and they'll have food. That's how they live. That's how they live. And what happened? Next verse. So be the one who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich in God. You're so wrapped up in all these things. God is dead. I don't need God. I am blessed. Which is another message, but I'm not giving that. Paul addressed this reality with worldly congregations. He was going into the world with the good news, and he was going into pagan cities almost regularly and dealing with their lack of understanding of truth. They had a reality, but the reality wasn't truth. And there's so many stories about this religious culture that had power and had all kinds of things, but they didn't have the truth. And Paul was confronting reality of a broken world with the truth, because the truth doesn't change. Our reality changes based on what we feel. And I'm sorry, but it doesn't matter what you feel, because the truth of God is unshakable. In Colossians 3, verse 5, he sums up this problem as, put to death what is earthly in you. What's earthly? Sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil, desire, and greed. All that is idolatry. And now this is a Greek letter. This has nothing to do with Israel. That which is earthly, sexual immorality. That's one of the first things we've seen erode. There is no more truth. No more truth in the morality of sex. It depends on how you feel. And people will do anything you can dream of, and if you are still married to the same person, I'm the fourth, as far as I know, we're the fourth couple, my bride and I, who made it to 50 years. Because in recent times, we celebrated Bob and Alan, Dwayne and Maria, and before that, Homer and Margaret. It's like a milestone to be married for 50 years, because people don't understand, why would you stay married for the same same person for all that time? That's not the world. The world system doesn't do that. And you all know that is a reality of the world. The world is broken. It all boils down to God is dead. I can do whatever I want. And what I want is what I feel, and what I feel is the truth. That's the reality. How I feel is the truth. I feel like a woman when I go into the women's dressing room. Like I said, I never see women fighting to get in the men's dressing room. It's always, teenage guys. I feel like a woman today. I want to go in the women's dressing room. Oh, jeez. We won't even go there. I don't want to even talk about that because you know what goes on there. But anyway, this talks about the younger son, and most people identify with the younger son. Most Western Christians, they identify with the younger son. Did your own thing, now you're back to God and restored. Nothing wrong with that concept, but there's also the older son, who I identified with. See, the older son was self-righteous. I stay there with God, and I do what I'm supposed to do, and I do what I'm supposed to do diligently. And all my focus is doing what I'm supposed to do. And I never ran away. I never got rebellious. I never went to a far country. I never got to the point where I wanted to eat pig food. I'm loyal to God. I am with God. I am here, and I'm doing everything. Then my screwball little brother comes back, and he's going to accept him. He's like, wait. You can't accept him. I never left. He's dead to us. It's his choice. We don't want him back. We're righteous, which is what happened during Yeshua's first coming. Remember? All the righteous religious people say, oh, those people. We don't want those people. We're righteous. It's a self-righteousness, which frankly is a little bit harder to break through sometimes. I witnessed to a lot of Orthodox, especially in Israel, a lot of Orthodox Jews I witnessed to. I have a lot of friends. I've been on a lot of tours, and I've talked to them. And it's hard because they are righteous and I'm not. And I said, well, and I'm reasonably effective, but it's harder to break through that than somebody who knows they're desperately lost, frankly. It is what it is. Proverbs 21:2 sums it up really simply. All a man's ways seem right in his own eyes, but Adonai weighs the heart. Seems like I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. In my own eyes, I'm really self-righteous, but God weighs my heart. See, the older brother was self-righteous, but his heart was wrong. And that's the way it can be with the religious people. In Luke 18, Yeshua is telling another parable. In verse 9, it says, then Yeshua spoke this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous while holding others in contempt. All right? Have you ever heard of that? A parable. People who trust in themselves that they were righteous while holding others in contempt. That's the religious versus the common folk. It's over and over again in his teaching. And in the context of that picture, that some trusted himself they were righteous while holding others in contempt. And in the continuing, this is a parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray. One a Pharisee, one a tax collector. You always see that division. A Pharisee and the tax collector. A Pharisee is the high order of religion. A tax collector is a dog. And the Pharisee knew the tax collector was a dog, and the tax collector knew that he was considered a dog. Not just a man, a dog, a pariah dog. The ones that went down the Kidron Valley and ate the garbage. Just totally outcast. All right, the Pharisee, in verse 11, which she doesn't have this one. That's from me. I hardly ever sender things right. The Pharisee stood and was praying to himself, "Oh God, I thank you I'm not like other people, thieving, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I tithe twice a week and tithe all that I get." I talked about that earlier. They tithed everything and they fasted every Tuesday and Thursday. They had it down. So you have two guys, our self-righteous one. "Thank you, I'm not like this schlep. I do all the things right. I do everything right. I tithe everything. I fast twice a week. I'm a good guy. I'm a righteous guy. And I think I'm not like that idiot who is a dog." The same thing as everybody else that Yeshua talks about. I'm righteous in my own eyes, but I can't stand anybody else. I am righteous by my practice, but my heart's not right. Then the next verse 13, the tax collector, standing some distance away, wouldn't even lift up his eyes toward heaven, but beat his chest, saying, "God, be merciful to me, a sinner." The righteous one, "Thank you, Lord, I am so good." And that guy is just so lost. And the guy said, "Forgive me. Forgive me." And he says in the parable, "I tell you, this man rather than the other went down to his home declared righteous." In other words, because of his heart, he is declared righteous, while the one who says he is righteous walks away with his own self-righteousness. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled. The one who humbles himself will be exalted. And in the Roman congregation, which was a really screwed up congregation, it was really a screwed up congregation. The letter is about a congregation that just went off the deep end. That's the history of it. The history is God threw all the Jews out of Rome, and you see that in the book of Acts, where Paul runs into people who are thrown out of Rome by the emperor, which means for the first time in history you have a congregation of all Gentiles and no Jews. In my own personal opinion, is God never intended that to happen. And then they got all crazy. They got all crazy and they started doing crazy things and saying crazy things. And Paul wrote that letter having never been there and say, "Quit being crazy." And he's talking about Jews and Gentiles and that. And you can't throw away the Jews because we are the people of God. You know, God forbid he should throw away the Jews. I'm a Jew. All right? In chapter 3, verse 9, which is before he gets out to who he is. What then? Are we better than they? Are we Jews better than the Gentiles? No, not at all. We have already made case. Both Jewish and Greek people are under sin. They said, "We're Israel. The church is Israel." God threw out the Jewish people because he started the church, and the church now replaces Israel. And now we're living in the church age. And what we are looking towards is the rapture, so the church can be taken up so the Jews can stay and go through the tribulation period. That's taught, and that's believed. And Paul said, "You got a problem. You think you become Israel. We are Israel." What are we saying then? We're not saying anything because both Israel and the nations are in sin. We're all under sin. You're fighting to be a Jew. And I said, being a Jew is not the problem, answer to your problem, because Jews are also under sin. As it is written in verse 10, there is no righteous, no, not one. There is, verse 11, there is no one who understands, no one who seeks God. All have turned aside. Together they have become worthless. There is no one who does good, not even one. You're fighting to establish your own righteousness, and you think you can be righteous by taking on Jewish practice and Jewish culture and Jewish ideas and doing it all right. But your heart is wrong. Your heart wrong. Nobody gets it right. You're trying to become like a people who rejected the Messiah. Some people who come into a Messianic synagogue are angry with God because you had the wrong parents. God knew I'd end up in a Messianic movement. Why couldn't he give me at least one Jewish grandmother? And those of us that are Jewish, it's like most of our great-grandparents, at least, and grandparents, depending how old, didn't make it because they were killed because they were Jews. And prior to 1967, nobody really wanted to be Jewish. And we assimilated into cultures because, like, they're out to kill us. Why? Because we're Jewish. Now everyone wants to be Jewish. It's like, wait a minute. That's not the answer. It's not like Christianity is bad, Messianic Judaism is good. We're both screwed up. We're both wrong. Just accept that reality. I think the strength of Beth Messiah is not that we're Jewish. The strength of Beth Messiah is we are diverse, but one under Messiah, and we're all sinners who are saved. And that's all we are. That is all we will ever be. Whether you're the younger brother who went out and got worldly, which a lot of you did, or the older brother who stayed righteousness. I was raised in a really solid family. Did education, good deeds. You know, education, good deeds. I never got wild. I never went wild, mostly. But I'm telling you, all have turned aside. You see, there were two sons. They were both wrong. Next verse, their throat is an open grave. With their tongues they keep deceiving. The poison of vipers is under their lips. Their mouth is full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Ruin and misery are in their paths. The way of shalom they have not known. Why? Verse 18, there is no fear of God before their eyes. I can do religion to I get it just right. Where do most Jewish people go when they want to get out of Judaism and they go to a church? Which church draws the most Jews? Do you know this? Yeah, somebody knows. Catholic Church. Jews flock to the Catholic Church. Why? All the ritual you want, you can do anything you want. They'll give you ritual. I get all my ritual and I go out and do anything I want. It's a great religion because you get to have a real high religious service that they have down to a T with a lot of religion. And then I can leave and do whatever I want. That's the best religion you can have, is show up, have a good religious service, and go live like you want to. And there are more Jewish people in the Catholic Church than in any other part of Christianity. Because they got lots of, no, I'm not picking on Catholic, I'm just telling you, this is the Jewish community's reality. You want to walk away from Judaism, try the Catholics. They got all the religion you want, and you can still do anything you want, which is the way it is in the Jewish community. You can become as religious as you want, and you can still largely do anything you want. And of the 45,000 denominations of Christianity, not all of them say, you say the right prayer, you're in the kingdom, you still do whatever you want. But show up and tithe. Here's what there is no fear. There's no fear of God before their eyes. There is no God. I could do anything I want. I could be as religious as I want, and I'm satisfied that I satisfy God because I'm doing a religious ritual. If I do religious ritual, I must be right before God. And see, when the older brother stands in his self-righteousness, who looks on the sinner, the tax collector, the other people that are just lost and slimy and horrible people, and they see the Father is accepting them back, it's like, no. We don't need that kind of person. But God accepts him. Now I'm offended. I was religious my whole life, and you're going to let this schlep who went out and did all kind of debauchery, he's coming in and being part of the family? No. I don't want that person with me. And here's the reality. Yeshua is saying, A man had 2 sons. They were both lost. They were both lost. One was religious. The other one was worldly. In Titus 3, beginning in chapter 4, with all the things going wrong in the world, and I'm telling you, things are going wrong in the world. There is a plot to destabilize the world, and you destabilize the world by removing truth as the basis of life. And you destabilize the world because my reality is based on what I feel. Don't confuse me with science. What I feel is the reality. A Supreme Court justice can't tell the difference between a man and a woman. That's not rocket science. That's a world that is becoming completely destabilized. At the highest level of law in this country, a Supreme Court justice that doesn't know the difference between a man and a woman. How bad is the world when that happens? An educated person who will most probably sit on our Supreme Court handling all the laws of the land can't tell the difference between a man and a woman. It's like, I'm sorry. My youngest grandson could tell the difference between a man and a woman. Judah. He could tell the difference. Not because his parents have drummed it into him. This is a man, this is a woman. It doesn't take common sense. He could probably figure out pretty quick that his dad's a man, his mom's a woman. It just, he hasn't been educated enough to say, no, you can't say that. And he's my grandson. He doesn't have to try to figure out if that fits or not. You understand? He can't figure it out. He doesn't have to figure it out. But today, children are being just one more aside because I pay attention to things. Somebody asked our Governor DeSantis, what caused you to start writing these laws? Did anyone see that? A little girl went to school, and the school decided she was a boy. Was it a boy or a girl? It was a little girl that they said, you're not a girl, you're a boy, right? And they gave her a boy's name, and they set her with the boys, and they assigned her with the boys. And her mom called the governor because she couldn't do anything about it. Because the school said her daughter was a boy. And she can go to the principal and say, excuse me, but my daughter's my daughter. And they said, no. And that's what led DeSantis to start passing laws. It's like, how broken is the world? There's no more truth. Truth doesn't count. Everything is broken. But when the kindness of God, our Savior, and His love for mankind appeared, this is a Jewish letter. It's not analytical. It's just a thought. Next verse. Not by deeds of righteousness we had done ourselves. He came to me, the older brother, not by my deeds of righteousness, because of His mercy. He saved us through the mikvah of rebirth and the renewing of Ruach HaKodesh. He came to Israel first. Israel's first in God's plan and action. He came to Israel not because Israel was righteous. We have never been righteous. He came to us because of His mercy. Because of His mercy. And He saved us through the mikvah, the immersion of rebirth and the renewing of Ruach HaKodesh. Verse 6, whom He abundantly poured out on us through Yeshua the Messiah, our Savior. Verse 7, so that being set right by His grace, we might become heirs with all the confidence of hope of eternal life. See, I had Jewish parents. I had Jewish grandparents and great-grandparents. We have Jewish. My grandchildren had Jewish grandparents. We're heirs because of what Messiah did for us, because we're as lost as everybody else. We're lost. And I have a confident hope of eternal life because I am set right by His grace, not by my religious practice. God's not impressed with our religious practice in this kingdom center. It's by grace you are saved. Ephesians, which is a Gentile congregation, a Greek congregation. By grace you have been saved through faith. It is not of yourselves. It's a gift from God. Don't think your religious practice is good enough now. Go back one. By grace you have been saved through faith. That's how you've been saved. It's not yourselves. It's a gift from God. Verse 9, go ahead, Joni. It is not based on deeds, so that no one may boast. Everybody's the same. There is no Jew in the kingdom of God. There's not a question of being Jew or Greek, male or female, free or slave. But here in the world and in this congregation, there is Jew and Greek. There is man and woman, and all these things do exist. But the reality is we're here because we're saved by grace. I'm not saved because of my lineage any more than you're lost because you don't have Jewish parents. It has nothing to do with that kind of stuff. It has to do with God's grace in our lives. And we need to be careful not to identify, I was lost, now I'm found, all is well. Because I was righteous, I was self-righteous. But I was just as lost, and I am saved by grace, just like everybody else. We're saved by grace. We're sinners. God has saved. Be blessed, everybody. Shabbat shalom. Remember, get your reservation for Seder. School of Breath will start in about 45 minutes. For those of you in School of Breath,